Mice given antibiotics more likely to die of influenza, which is the flu. That is an article title I just saw, and it drew me in, and I said, is there actual validity to this? Because essentially, according to the article, which is quoting the research, and I'll get to that in just a moment, it shows that essentially during this study, again, it is mice-based, but why this is still important is that it is applicable to humans. They were 3 times more likely to die when given antibiotics. So essentially, here's what happened. It looked at multiple studies, and I'll share those studies with you, and I'll also link them up at stephencabral.com/3553, that there were essentially 3 groups. There were the group, well, there's always the placebo or the control that are given nothing. Then another group was given antibiotics. Then another group was given antivirals and antibiotics, and another group that was just given antivirals. And so when we looked at all the specific groups, what happened was the group that was given the antibiotics had the worst outcome. Now that was pretty clear. So I do want to state that influenza, aka the flu, is a virus. And when you give antibacterials, which are antibiotics, for a viral-based issue, it can actually make it worse. Now, of course, I have to give you my standard disclaimer. I can't provide any medical advice, medical treatment, medical cures, medical diagnosis. But this is actually really important because many medical doctors, my own pediatrician when I was a child, used to give my mom Z-Packs. I don't know if you remember those, but the 5-day zithromycin packs that you could just keep at home. I mean, I don't think you were supposed to do that. But anytime we would get the sniffles, essentially, which is a virus for most people, we would just take a Z-Pack. The problem is that, okay, maybe it's going to do a little something, but probably not because it's a virus in the short term, or it may not lead to something that it's going to, weaken the immune system. It's going to lead to something like a secondary bacterial infection, which again is more rare. But the problem is it worsens the innate immune system as the more that you take these antibiotics. So here's what they found in the studies, that it was actually interesting because there was 2 different studies. So this isn't even just one study that found this. They found that when they gave antibiotics to the mice, it essentially decimated their gut bacteria. And why that is important is that the gut bacteria helps to control an inflammatory immune cell called the eosinophils. And the eosinophils then migrate to the lungs. Again, I'm paraphrasing. This is very in-depth science, but I want you to understand this, is that when your gut bacteria has been thrown off, it affects the overall immune system in the body, which then affects the lungs. I did a previous show of even the adrenal lung connection, and I'll link that up here today again at episode 3553. But here's the interesting thing is that when the gut flora, so the dysbiosis in the gut, is in balance, they actually use the word dysbiosis from the antibiotics. It means that yeast can grow, or fungus, which actually led to fungal issues potentially in the lungs as well. And it led to an increase of these certain immune cells due to the dysbiosis in the gut. Then when the body also was dealing with a virus, there was a massive cascade of inflammation. Think about the virus, 5 years ago. I don't want to get banned more on YouTube and other channels, but that is a lot of what happened. So here's a bigger issue that we need to think about. Okay, antibiotics worsen outcomes when taken when you have a virus, but also think about it. In general, antibiotics disrupt the gut flora, the bacteria of the intestines, right? And so what happens is that it can lead to leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability, which then leads to essentially an aggravated immune system. Since your body then is attacking bacteria that's overgrown inside of the gut, it can absolutely do that. It can move through the single cell gut lining. And as bacteria may move out through the gut lining, you set up a greater cascade, I said, of immune cells. So this is also, which we know, a trigger for autoimmune issues. So while not all of us are dealing with a lot of comorbidities and have to worry about dying from the flu, but this is a real thing. Remember, more people die from the flu than a lot of these other issues that we were talking about in the past, right? The whole pandemic. It's important, like the flu is a real thing. But in general, if you have an imbalanced microbiome, this is the big thing, your immune system is most likely compromised as well. That's why there's almost nothing more important than rebalancing your gut bacteria. Now, there are simple lab tests. You're welcome to run them with your favorite practitioner. You can run the bacteria and parasite stool test. If you don't want to do a stool test, you can do something called a Candida metabolic and vitamins test. It's a simple urine test, easy to run. First morning urine, ship it in, you get your results back in 2 weeks. It looks at yeast overgrowth. It looks at bacteria like C. diff. So really important test. You can run it with any integrative health practitioner, level 2 or level 3, or even our team over at Equilife. That's up to you. All right, but here's the thing. 2 specific studies, microbiota-driven tonic interferon signals in lung stromal cells protect from influenza virus infection. Again, like I said, this goes pretty in depth in the specific science itself, but it actually looked at not only disrupting the microflora, the gut bacteria of mice, but actually what happens when you fix it. And lo and behold, the immune system started to calm down. Now, we've seen this in our practice for the past couple decades. When you do a functional medicine detox, 21 days, then you do something like the CBO protocol, and you rebalance the gut flora, and you do the CBO finisher to heal and seal the gut wall, lo and behold, autoimmune issues start to go away. Again, I can't provide the medical cures, treatment plans, and make any of those claims, but you'd be surprised because everything has an underlying root cause. And if the person's issue was an imbalanced gut and you fix the unbalanced gut and that person goes from imbalanced to healthy, a healthy body can't be sick. It just can't. It turns off those specific parts of the genetics that you're even more prone to. All right, I want to do one more. This is really important. Others study antibiotic prescription for outpatients with influenza and subsequent outcomes. So what I want to do is go into these just quickly with you because these were actually very well done. And so what they found was antibiotic treatments impaired lung clearance of MRSA after the influenza infection and made worse bacterial controlled infections. They also found that eosinophils appeared to suppress macrophage function. So basically the immune system's ability to clear out bacteria, which was a big issue in these particular issues. The antibiotics also induced fungal dysbiosis, which is essentially a yeast imbalance as well. And they found a positive correlation between eosinophil levels and antibiotic use. Now, why this is important, especially people like me, or you have yeast overgrowth, candida overgrowth, mold-based issues, postnasal drip, allergies, asthma, etc., eosinophils are usually a big part of that. Even acid reflux. I had acid reflux. I had postnasal drip for like a decade. Nobody understood this eosinophil gut-based connection. It literally changed my life fixing my gut. I mean, but it makes sense. They couldn't figure out, conventional medicine could not figure out why my immune system was shutting down. I had yeast overgrowth, I had SIBO, so small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and I had H. pylori. I had a million food sensitivities, but that's because I had so much inflammation in my gut. So when you look at that, I had everything except parasites. They didn't find parasites. They did a one-day stool test. Maybe I had them, but I did so many parasite, cleanses that hopefully I did get anything that was there. But this is really important to look at. Not just, and I brought this up, yes, be careful if you have the flu and you're given antibiotics, especially if you're 55, 60 plus. But even if you don't, if you're dealing with autoimmune issues, if you're dealing with chronic inflammation, we need to go to the gut as essentially that foundational base level of health. If it's off, it's difficult to just give someone some licorice root for their adrenals or some, selenium or B6 or iodine for their thyroid, right? It's like those things are all great. They might help, right? They might help because maybe they even have a deficiency in those. The issue is that if you're not fixing a true underlying root cause, you're always going to be up against that. You're never going to get fully well. So this was one part public service announcement, one part bigger picture. Fix the gut and test the gut if you can. There's also something called the Big 3 Gut Bundle. Looks at 190 plus food sensitivities triggering inflammation. The Candida Metabolic and Vitamins test, amazing for looking urine sample. Look at yeast overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, vitamin levels, mitochondria, etc. And then there's a bacteria and parasite stool test looking for parasites, H. pylori, and bacterial overgrowth. So all of those, I can link up the labs actually. I can link up the labs at stephencabral.com/3553. I can't link up the CBO protocol, CBO finisher, Parasupport, any of those, but you'll be able to find those, of course, always over at Equilife or working with your local integrative health practitioner. Take care, everybody. Hopefully this was helpful. I thank you. As always, do share the show with anyone you believe it could serve.